How many of you have taken a webinar with me or seen me speak somewhere else? A couple of people? Okay, but lots of newbies, good. So Bob was very thorough with my bio. He's a CPA, that's a good sign. So I'm gonna flip through this really quickly. The bottom line here is that where I'm coming from is that we do a lot of training and coaching of communications staff at nonprofits, but we also do a lot of research. We do an annual trends report. This coming up trends report will be our 10th one, where we have 1,000 communication staff at nonprofits answer a whole lot of questions. So a lot of what I'm telling you is also based in a lot of historical good data and research as well. So Bob asked me to talk to you today about how to keep your volunteer fundraisers engaged in your work. So that's what we're going to spend the next 2 hours doing. So let's talk about who some of those people are. How many of you do some kind of physical run, walk, ride event? Show of hands. Okay, good. How many of you are having or seeing other people do fundraisers for you, whether you know about it or not? For example, on Facebook. Birthday fundraisers is a really popular one, and you're like, who are these people and where can I get that money? Dinners or galas where you're looking for table hosts or volunteers who will go sell 10, 20, 30 tickets. Who's doing that kind of volunteer fund? Okay, lots of events. Giving days. I actually should have looked that up, but what are the big giving days in Ohio? So the big National Giving Tuesday, is there any sort of state level or local giving days that community foundations run? No? Talk to your community foundation staff about that. Community foundation staff are like, no! Okay, house parties. Anybody do sort of a house party model? Couple people? Okay, or other ways that you're asking your volunteers to hit up their friends and family on your behalf. Okay, that's what we're really talking about today. So in a little while, you're going to get a worksheet, and we're actually going to work through the worksheet together, and right at the top, it's going to say, what kind of event am I doing? So I really want you to pick from what we just talked about today, from some of these options. Okay, so you'll get your worksheet, you'll fill in your event name and type. Now, there are people, let's just get this out of the way. There are people that want to raise money for you and you don't really want them to. So let's just get those people out of the way. Okay, if you feel like there's a lot of people randomly using your logo out there in the world trying to raise money on your behalf and you have some discomfort about this, I suggest that you just Google third-party fundraising guidelines, and a bazillion PDFs will come up with the guidelines that other nonprofits are using. They often touch on things like, do you have to apply to the nonprofit? Do you want to know about it? What are the guidelines for using the logo, the name of the organization, how much staff support will be available, if any? A lot of people will assume that you will be so excited that they're doing a fundraiser for you, but can your staff do this and this and this and this? And you're like, no. So you need to get that out there. Who they should not contact in your community for money, if you don't want them sort of hitting up your corporate sponsors, for example, and just other legal and ethical rules that they may not be aware of. Keeping a percentage of the money you raise, for example, big ethical lapse. Okay, we don't even want contract fundraisers doing that for our organization, so we need to be very clear with people. All right, so let's just forget about these people now. Let's start working with the people who you want to help raise money for your organization. Now, in the nonprofit sector, we have a lot of bad habits about this. So we're going to get all of those out of the way right now, and then just focus on what you're supposed to be doing. But on your worksheet, I'm going to ask you to write down what some of those bad habits are, so you can remind yourself to go work on them. So when you see yourself in these slides, make note of that. So the first one, when we don't have a communications plan, when we don't really have a whole idea for how we're going to really work with our volunteer fundraisers, is that staff have this Groundhog Day anxiety. It's like you get over the event, you slip into amnesia about it, and then it comes back up again, and you freak out, right? Because you got to do it all over again. And so it's very stressful. And then there's a lot of hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Oh my gosh, we got to get the save the date card out. We got to get that thing out. We got to do this. We got to do that. Da, 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 da. And everybody's freaking out and working way too many hours. Okay? Then you start putting the finger on your volunteers and you start begging them to do things and they get all worked up. So now everybody's stressed out. Some of your returning volunteers just want to keep doing things the way they've always done it. And so maybe you're making a change this year and, you know, old Beth, she's going to continue to do it the way she's done it. And that might mess you up. And then you're getting into the deadlines. Lots of guilt about, you haven't sold all your tickets, Bob. Have you sold all your tickets, Bob? Bob is going to tell you, after I'm done talking, about his experience as a donor, which is super awesome to have at a conference like this. You don't get that very often, to really hear a donor, a major donor, a committed donor, talk about what they need from you. So that's going to be a real treat. And then, you know, you have low fundraiser retention year over year. You feel like you're constantly having to twist the arms of the people to do this and try to find new people all the time. And it's so hard every year. And because of that, you don't end up raising nearly as much money as you could. And then the event happens and you're so exhausted that you just say, thank you, thank you, thank you, goodbye, because you don't want to see these people anymore. And then you're quiet and you go back to all the other millions of things that you have to do at your nonprofit. Okay, so this is all very understandable, but it's not good. It's not how you maximize your relationships with your donors. It's not how you maximize your fundraising. So those are the bad habits. And when you get your worksheet, I want you to think about the one or two. Bob?
The worksheets are currently being copied, because I know Kivi's mentioned those a couple times. So
They'll be coming.
Pass them out here in a second.
Yeah.
I should have said that in my...
That's okay. You got paper. Just make some notes, okay? So far, the only thing you're missing is what is your event and what are the old habits that you need to break. Okay, so this is not an awareness problem for most of you. This is a donor retention problem. It's a volunteer retention problem. And the way that we fix that is we keep those people with us. We keep the love for your organization and what you're doing alive. So what we're really going to talk about today is that. A communications plan for your volunteer fundraisers that keeps the love alive. So I've talked about all the things you're not supposed to do. Let's shift gears into what we are supposed to do, okay? So what you need to do is come up with a year-long communications plan for your volunteer fundraisers. Now, some of you may be thinking, oh, that's great. I don't even have a year-long communications plan, period. Okay? Now, it's a problem too. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today can be applied to your organization as a whole. But for today, I'm really going to focus on a particular segment of your donors, which are your volunteer fundraisers. You should also have a segmented plan for your major donors. A lot of you probably do that, whether you're calling it that or not. You probably treat your major donors a little differently than everybody else. Okay? So what I'm suggesting is that your volunteer fundraisers are just as special a segment of your donors as your major donors. So how do we do that? This is Communications Marketing for Nonprofits 101. There are 3 questions that you are always answering. So this is what you can apply to everything in your organization. Question number 1 is the who question. Who am I trying to reach? Or who cares about this? What's our message to them? What do we want them to do? Why should they do it? So that's answering the so what question. And all of us have to answer who cares and so what all the time. We cannot be all unicorns and rainbows and sunshine and light about this and think that every single person cares about what your nonprofit does. They do not. There are too many things to care about. We can't care about everything. So a lot of us don't care about what you all do. We have to accept that. We have to find our people. We have to find the people who do care and really focus on them. So who are we trying to reach? What's our message? And then how do we deliver that message to them? You should be answering these 3 questions all the time. Now this third question, this is the one that everyone wants to start with in your board meetings. Why aren't we on TikTok? What? Why don't we have a billboard? Why aren't we buying ads on the radio? Because we haven't answered those other 2 questions first. Who are we talking to? Are those people on TikTok, for example? And what is our message to them? Okay, so you always need to circle back to these first 2. They're a little bit of a yin and yang kind of chicken and egg thing. Sometimes the audience will be very clear and then you have to really figure out your message. Other times you're rock solid on your message and you have to figure out, well, who are the people that care about that thing we're saying? So you're kind of always going back and forth between the who and the message, but you need to have one of those very solid before you start talking about communications channels. Okay, so that's your Nonprofit Marketing 101 lesson for the day. All right, so let's apply this now to our volunteer fundraisers. How do we retain these people? Again, this is a special group of people. This is not everybody. And again, Bob is going to give you a great case study in a little bit about, you're going to talk about how you were recruited, right? Yes. Okay, so who's sitting in that red chair? Those are the people we want. It's not everybody. So let's learn a little bit about who these people are, and knowing that how they feel about you actually predicts their behavior, and then understanding a little bit about what they expect from you as a nonprofit. So let's do this. So the first thing I want to encourage you to think about, and this is, we call this persona development in the marketing lingo, is trying to figure out who your people are, what they care most about. So you can start with some of these sort of big value statements. You know, are they really concerned about time and convenience, for example? Or are they more driven by wanting to leave a legacy and giving back in their community? What is it that really motivates them? So as you're thinking about the event that you want volunteer fundraisers for, I want you to start imagining 3 imaginary friends, imaginary volunteer fundraiser donors. They can be real people if you want, but I think it's actually better to sort of build some composite imaginary friends, because we don't want to get too bogged down in the quirkiness of, you know, particular individuals. Bob and I had a nice dinner, and I hear that he's into some different kind of music. I didn't exactly get the details on that.
We don't have time to make it.
Okay, but the problem with, you know, using Bob as a persona would be, okay, now I gotta like have weird music at the gala. So we don't want to go that deep into real human beings, because that can sort of lead you astray. But we want to have a general idea of who these people are and what's important to them. So if, for example, you're trying to reach someone, you know, a Gen X mom, time and convenience is super important to me, because you know I am running around all the time. And so you're asking me to squeeze something in. It's not the same as if you're trying to reach people who maybe have a more kind of leisurely day. All right, so we really have to understand who we're talking to and what's important to them. All right, so you will fill that in when you get your worksheet. It's really important for you to understand that people give to nonprofits and participate because it makes them feel good. Okay, who are my runners in the room? How many of you like to run? You people, I never understand you, but there is apparently something called a runner's high. Do you get the runner's high ever? Okay, what does that feel like? She's like, sometimes. Do you get the runner's high?
Always.
Okay, tell me about the runner's high. What does that feel like?
I guess when I'm running, I just feel like, you know, if something were after me, I could outrun it.
Good.
When I think of my day, but I don't know, you just kind of just delete everything negative out of your body, and you just know you're doing something good. I think you're doing something good for yourself.
Right, okay.
So even if you walk fast, I think you can still get that high.
All right, I wish that were true for me, but anyway. So what's happening chemically in the brain is endorphins and all the happy hormones, right? Well, people get that same experience when they give to charity. Okay, so you're getting the chemical high in your brain. when you do something good. So we need to make sure that we are constantly getting our volunteer fundraisers high in this way. Just this way. Okay? There's also been some really good research that shows that how donors feel about you, whether you are giving them that high or not, predicts their future behavior. So Donor Voice did a bunch of research where they asked all kinds of donors, I think a couple dozen statements, and then followed their giving behavior to see which statements and which answers were predictive of what we would consider a good donor, someone who gives regularly or upgrades their gift. And they found that these three statements were the most important indicators of whether someone was going to be a good donor for you. I am a committed Humane Society donor. I would say yes, strong yes to that. I feel a sense of loyalty to the Humane Society or whoever your organization is. Again, I would answer that yes. I am super loyal. And they are my favorite nonprofit charity. Okay, these are not quotes from your annual report. These are not your infographic. These are not your mission statement. This is what determines whether someone stays with you and continues to give. And I see the worksheets coming in. Okay, so you guys can catch up on your worksheet. So this is what we're trying to do, is to behave in a way, to communicate in a way with our donors that makes them say, yes, I'm committed. Yes, I'm loyal. You are my favorite cause. All right, that is the gold mine that you're looking for with people. And why is this super important? Because most donors give the majority of their gifts to a single nonprofit. Okay, the favorites win the fundraising game of life. So we want to be favorites, at least for some of our people, because then their loyalty will bring additional funds to us. Now, let's take this back. That's sort of general fundraising stats. Let's take this back to the volunteer fundraisers. Some data from the peer-to-peer forum, which it's the nonprofit of all the race, walk, ride people. So if you run one of those and you don't know about peer-to-peer, you need to connect with them. They have great information and conferences for you. 10% of event participants bring in 55% of the dollars, right? This is like the basic kind of Pareto principle, where a small number of people are responsible for a majority of the activity. And returning participants raise 2.5 times as much as a new participant. So again, this is not really an awareness issue where we need more people. You may want more people, but what's more important and what's more productive for you is to really focus on bringing back your fundraisers year after year and really supporting them so that they can be the ones that really bring in the majority of the money. Okay, so how are we doing so far? Do I have any questions so far? I like to take questions on the fly as opposed to saving them all up. Everybody with me so far on why we need to hold on to our volunteer fundraisers and understanding who they are? As you're getting your worksheet, go ahead and start filling in where we are now. Think about this a little bit. This is sort of the first, like, really kind of strain your brain question for your worksheet. Like, what do we need to do to become or stay somebody's favorite cause? That answer will be different for each of you, depending on what you do and the kinds of relationships that your donors have with your cause, with the people that you help, or the mission of your organization. But you really want to spend some time thinking about this. This is a great question for a board conversation or a retreat with staff, to really think about what would it take for our donors to really think of us as their favorite. Again, this is really about building those relationships and making sure that people feel loyal, feel committed to your cause. What would that take? Okay? And again, think about maybe some of the bad behavior that you're doing that's actually hurting that. Note that on your worksheet at the top too. Okay, so last little bit here about our donors. We have to understand that they, of course, are not living in some little bubble with you. I have to sort of burst your bubble here a little bit. They are living in the real world. So there are some major tech companies that are a big part of all of our lives. I want you to fill in the blank here. Which tech company do you think is responsible for this? People expect a frictionless online engagement experience with instant gratification. Who's responsible for that? I'm going with Amazon. Okay. I live in rural North Carolina. We have a Walmart. We're getting a Starbucks next year, and it's big news, people. Okay, but I have to do a lot of online shopping because, again, I'm a busy mom. I don't have time to drive the half an hour to the next biggest city that has all of the things. So even though, I have some issues with Amazon as a company, the reality is I have to use them a lot. So I'm used to going on there, finding exactly what I need, them suggesting to me what I'm actually looking for, and clicking a button and going. Okay? Now, you're not Amazon. The nonprofit sector is not Amazon. And yet, when I go to your website and try to sign up to do something or donate, how much friction am I getting? What would be an example of friction on a nonprofit website? Give me some examples.
Having to create a username and password.
Yes, before I can do anything. What are you doing? No. What else?
Too many layers to get to the place you need to be.
Right, I gotta click and I'm on like page 7 and I still cannot find your donate form. I'm giving up. I don't have time for this. What else?
Website doesn't work.
It just doesn't work, right? And especially it doesn't work on this, because I'm doing all of my life in that 10 minutes when I'm sitting in that carpool line. Okay, so if your website is not mobile responsive, you may as well just consider it broken. Okay, Julia Campbell, who is a great consultant, those of you that do a lot of social media work need to follow, she says your website is like a staff person. And if it's not performing, you need to fire it or put it on a, what do they call the PIP, the performance enhancement plan or whatever, improvement plan. You need to fix the website. It needs to do its job. Okay, so people, they want to get on there, they want to do their thing, and they want to get what they need and be gone. All right, let's look at another situation here. People expect you to understand them and deliver customized, engaging content. So who's responsible for making us feel this way about the internet? Another big name, I heard it earlier. This is the Facebook effect, right? This is the news feed effect. So if I come to your website and maybe you've sent an email saying, yeah, we're looking for people to go, raise money for us for their birthdays or in a race or whatever. Okay, great. I don't have time to deal with that right now. But then I'm on my phone in the carpool line and I dial you up on my phone and go to your website and I can't find anything about this race. Okay, if you're sending mass email to people about signing up for something, it needs to be on the homepage. There needs to be a big fat button or text or something that I can click on. People expect that content to be customized to them. Also think about this in terms of your returning fundraisers. So if I've been raising money for you for 3 or 4 years, and then you treat me the same way that you treat the newest person, how is that going to make me feel? I don't feel acknowledged, I don't feel seen. I feel like I'm separate from the team in some way, I'm just like everybody else. And it's certainly not how you treat the people who, you want them to consider you the favorite cause. So we need to really think about how we can be more customizing. Now, I know this is hard. It's like, we don't have a communications plan. What are you talking about? I can't do this. But this is the reality check, right? This is what people are expecting. You just have to do your best. Okay, our last one, people expect accurate answers to their questions and instant help when they have problems. Who's responsible for this? Google. Right. So, old information about previous events, this happens all the time. I cannot tell you how many times people will Google your event and the page from 2017 will come up as the #1 search result. And I go to that page and there's nothing linked to the 2019 or 2020 event. And now I'm like, okay, too busy, I'm out. So you need to go in there and either delete those pages or you can redirect those pages to the new page. But don't expect that Google is going to send them to the right page. Google is going to send them to the page that's gotten the most traffic in the past. It's not going to be your brand new page. So you need to redirect all that traffic to where you want it to be. How many of you are getting questions on Facebook Messenger via your Facebook page? Is it just making you insane, right? Like these people at 10:30 at night messaging you. You have your own life, you're trying to get your own kids in bed, I understand. But this is the expectation that people have. So you need to, there are a couple of different ways to deal with that. You can have Facebook automatically reply to people and say, we'll answer these questions between 9 and 2 or whatever, Monday through Friday. You can set those things up so that people know that you're there, that it's not just this black hole, and that you'll get back to them. But that needs to be a part of somebody's job. Whoever your communications people are, or whoever has those responsibilities, unfortunately, I'm sorry, this is another one of them. Okay, this is an expectation that people have. And this stuff matters. If people don't hear back, or your website looks out of date, what do you think they assume? They don't assume that you're super busy saving the world. They assume that you're dead or out of business. Okay, so we really got to keep up. All right, so the effect of all of this is that this is what the expectations are when people are engaging with your organization online. Now again, these are very hard things to reach on a nonprofit budget, but you need to be aware of them and to do what you can to give them these kinds of experiences over time. Okay, this is the best way to convince your board that you need money for a CRM, a website, is to make sure that they understand, and they will when you go through this conversation, like people know about Google and Facebook, they'll start to get it. So you need to budget to get that software that can help you do these things. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 2 minutes here to go and fill in your worksheet really quickly. I wanna make sure that you've got all of those questions answered about the who. We really wanna make sure that you leave with some good initial thinking today as we're filling in this plan. I will set my little timer here for 2 minutes. Okay, so what are some of the things you wrote down? Let's just hear a few ways that you've filled in the worksheet here. What are some of the things you want to go back and discuss or think about or maybe change that you want to work on? Yes?
With us, we have a media shower camp out every year. It's our biggest fundraiser, and that.
They do a meteor shower camp out, which sounds really cool.
And,
Good.
I mean, this year it was like
4,500 people.
4,500 people. Wow. Okay.
And so it's a camp out, and then we have different other stuff going on. What we need to do is take some of the responsibility from our naturalist and put it on, so that she's not overburdened with what, everything that's going on.
Okay, great. Acknowledging that this is a lot of work and you may be putting it on too few people or the wrong people. Good.
And then what was the other?
We're not marketing memberships.
Yeah.
We're not asking for donations at that time.
Okay. Duh, right? My husband is the relatively new executive director of the Yadkin Riverkeeper in North Carolina, and they do all these paddles. And he realized that they have never been doing membership or solicitations on the paddles, and it's just like, what is wrong with you people? So yeah, we're working on that. Other questions that you're going to talk about with your staff or things you want to remember so far about the people you're trying to recruit? Yes?
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure. Who's got the fear of failure? You or your supporters or everybody?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And so what are some of the things that you can do to help people get over that? That's what you're going to talk about at your board meeting, right?
I'm the director of a brand new nonprofit, only been in existence for a couple of months.
Okay.
And I have a board member who came on that was supposed to be our fundraising guru, and I swear that she looks in the mirror and she's scared of herself every day. I'm very frustrated. Honestly, I would love to yank her out of that position, but I'm not the person on the board to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so it's very frustrating to me.
Right.
Because I cannot do everything for everybody.
Right. Okay. Fundraising comes in lots of different shapes and forms and sizes, right? So if you have someone who is more kind of quiet and reserved, she may be a good writer, I don't know. But maybe she's thinking she can write your appeals or something, I don't know. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. So we've talked a lot about our people, understanding our people. That's the first step in doing any good marketing or fundraising, is really understanding who these people are and what they need from us and what that relationship looks like. Our goal is to really get these fundraisers to think of themselves as year-round partners, not just when you need them. Year-round partners. So, another little side caveat question here. Let's deal with this. What about the real donors, the friends and family of your volunteers? Okay, so these are the people that are actually giving the money that your fundraiser, your volunteer is essentially bundling. That's a political term, but they're bundling that money and then giving it to you. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, that's great, but I really want to go connect with each of those people. And I would really caution you about trying to do that. Your job is really to keep that volunteer fundraiser happy. They are the gatekeeper to their community. Let them play that role. It's much easier to keep that one person happy who then will tap those 20 or 30 people on your behalf than to try to establish a new relationship with those 20 or 30 people, a lot of whom do not care. Why is that? How does that work? Why does someone give you money when they don't really care about what you do? How is that happening?
They love you or giving it to you.
That's right. Right? I can't tell you how many things my parents have given to. They don't care a bit. But the 13-year-old granddaughter asked Grandpa. And so Grandpa's writing the checks. All right? And Grandpa has gotten irritable when those nonprofits have tried to email him directly. Can you tell Gianna to tell the blah, blah, blah that I don't want to get their email? It's like, Dad, just unsubscribe. The 13-year-old is not going to tell people. Okay, so what about these people? You can gently offer ways for them to opt in. Maybe they really do care. Okay, there are going to be some that generally are, super excited to do this. So give them ways to opt into your list, but don't do it automatically. Ensure that your fundraisers are saying the right things to these people. And that includes asking them, thanking, and reporting. Okay, we're going to talk about ask, think, report here in just a minute. So you really want to empower your volunteer fundraisers with that information. A lot of what your job here in this communications plan is once you've got those volunteers, it's to really give them the content to then share with their people. That's a lot of what the communication strategy really is at some point. Okay, so we're going to move on now to our message. So what do we say to these people? Okay, and again, remember, the real question is how do we become their favorite cause? And the really simple answer to this is just prove that they matter. Everything that I'm saying today all boils down to make sure these people understand how important they are to your cause, to the change that you're trying to make in the world. Remember, they don't really care about your 501c3 blah, blah, blah. They care about the change that you're making in the world. All of you are here to make change. And you have to always stay in touch with what that is. Because if you're not, then you might as well be a business or a government agency or just doing it as an individual. Nonprofits are here to collectively make change in the world that other parts of our world cannot do for whatever reason or don't want to do. So you need to always stay in touch with that change because that's what really people want to do, and you need to prove to them constantly that they are making that change with you. So the easy way to do this is the ask, thank, report cycle. How many of you have heard of the ask, thank, report cycle before? If you've taken any fundraising with people like Tom Ahern, he's the one that came up with this. And so what we're going to do today is tack on the feeling part to the ask, thank, report cycle. So we're going to ask them to do things for us. As we're doing that, our intent is really not to just like scrape the money out of their wallet. It is to make them feel included in the work. We're going to thank them. And it's not just like a quick, blah, thank you, bye. It's to really make them feel appreciated. And then we're going to report back all the good things that they are making possible. And we're not just going to like throw them the annual report. We're really going to make them feel like they're an insider, like they're in the know. They know more about this than their friends and neighbors. They're really part of an important change that's taking place in the world. So let's work on the ask, and then we will take a little break. Okay, so we're going to ask them to do things. Again, this is about them feeling included. Okay, so I want you to think now, what are, and this is for your worksheet, you're customizing to your event, what are 3 calls to action specifically to our volunteer fundraisers? What are 3 things that we want them to do? What are those 3 things that are going to make them really feel included in the work of our organization? So again, depending on what your event is, they're going to be a little different, but I'm talking about things like register to run in the race, build your fundraising team, make your plan for how you're going to recruit your fundraisers. Okay, so this is what I would be saying to someone like Bob. Register to be a fundraiser, build your team, make your plan, Bob. All right, so figure out what your calls to action are. Write those down in your worksheet. Give you a few seconds here, and then let's talk about what some of them are. Okay, what are some of our calls to action for our volunteer fundraisers? Let's hear some of them. What do we want them to do? Yes?
I'm kind of thinking of not so much an event while I'm filling this out, but more of a campaign.
Okay.
So one of them is identify prospects.
Okay, and tell me a little bit more about the campaign. Like, what is this thing?
So this is an endowment campaign.
Okay.
I figure my colleague's probably doing our gala, so I'm doing the endowment campaign.
Okay, and so what are some of the different steps that someone who really wants to help you with that would do?
Well, I think they would make a commitment themselves.
Okay.
They would think of people that we should be talking to, some of whom they might actually know themselves, and then we would hope that they would help make introductions for us to at least some of those people.
Okay.
Hopefully there's people in there that we don't already know.
Okay.
And they have some ownership.
Right, so that's great, right? So what are the 3 very specific things he just said? What is our little 1, 2, 3 list of how a donor can support this campaign? Donate yourself, make a leadership gift or whatever, how you want to snazz that up. Then what?
Identify prospects.
Okay, prospects is nonprofit wonky language, right? So how could we edit the word prospects into something that,
Potential supporters.
Identify your tribe.
right, other people, supporters, you want to use language like that that's less wonky. Other people who may also care about the change in the world, right? Something along those lines that's not wonky. And then what is the last one? introduce us to some people, right? Most of the people in the world are afraid of public speaking, right? That's what you always hear. I would rather do this all day than have to go ask my friends and family for money, okay? People are really afraid of that. And so they are going to assume, because we always go into our fear mode, that if I give you somebody's name, you're actually going to make me go do the ask. Okay? And that's why a lot of your board members, when you say, give me the names, they're like, what? Bye. See you in a couple months, right? They're terrified because they think eventually what you're going to do, well, one, you're going to say something stupid to those people. You're going to embarrass them, or you're going to come back and actually ask them to go ask for money. Okay, so you've got to be very specific. Making an introduction, we'll come with you. Like set up a lunch or whatever. The staff will be there to actually make the ask. Okay, great. What's another set of calls to action? Somebody have something a little different? Yes.
Board event, for example, which we have coming up next week, I've asked our board to invite people that they think might be in alignment with our mission. But what they can do to share with that person is simply to share their own story.
Great.
To tell their friends, their family, their associates, their coworkers,
Yep.
why they have a passion about our mission.
Perfect, okay? Now, people like to check things off the list, right? Anybody in here like do something and then write it on the list just so you can check it off? Okay, so all the time, right? So people like to be able to check stuff off. So I would encourage you to put a number on that, okay? Like this month, 2 people. Or, this week you may have some adjustments to make. But so you're going to give them a specific number of people that they need to contact, or a specific number of people to just share your story. This is perfect setup for you again, Bob, with your example. So, we all have pasts, right? We all have histories, and there are things that happen to us in our lives that are the reason we're interested in different nonprofits now. And getting people to get in touch with that and to share it with other people is extremely powerful. Okay, it builds that connection. So, if you don't have like the grandchild calling the grandpa thing going on, you can build a connection that's just as strong through personal storytelling. Anyone else want to share their asks? Okay, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break for that message. Okay, so that's what we're going through in the big picture here. We talked a lot about the who. Now we're in that message question, and there's another 3 things we're going to focus on within the messaging. Ask, think, report. Okay? So who am I talking to? Message. How do I deliver the message? Within messaging, ask, think, report. Okay? So we did asking. Now we're going to talk about how we thank our volunteer fundraisers. And again, this is really about trying to make them feel appreciated. So I want you to spend a couple of minutes thinking about 3 different ways that you can say thank you. Okay, other than just saying thank you. Like, you got to get more specific than that. Okay, so some examples. Thank you for helping this year. You're doing great. Here's some additional things that you could try. So that would be, sort of into the process of recruiting people to raise money, maybe get sponsors for a race, whatever it is. They're midway through that process. You want to give them encouragement about what to do. And then as you're, approaching your event, you can give them a few more tips. You're going to make such a huge difference. It's all about letting people know that they're appreciated and included in this. It's not just saying thank you, but it's really conveying that sense that they are an important part of the team and they're really valued as part of the team. So again, I'm going to give you a couple minutes here to think about this, because this is a little hard. It's more than just thank you. How do we really do that? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes and then we'll share a little bit on those. 3 different ways to convey appreciation or thanks to your volunteer fundraisers at any stage in the process. You can pick. Okay, so let's hear some of them. What are some messages that we can build into our campaign or our schedule or whatever we're calling it to let people know that we really appreciate them? What would those sound like for your organization? Who's got some examples? Yes.
So our volunteers are largely in the workplace. We do a United Arts Fund workplace giving. So my volunteers are often voluntold. So my first thank you would be thank you for agreeing to be the point person for your workplace campaign. So thank you for taking this on. I would also, there's a fair amount of paperwork and involvement with keeping track. So my second thank you would be thank you for an organized nature of keeping track of what's going on with your internal campaign. And then my last one would be thank you for reaching out to new people and not just hitting up the same employees each year.
Great. Could you all hear that? I should probably go lean in and let people speak into the mic. But so she's in a situation where it's workplace giving. People are pretty much told that they're going to do it, right? So you want to thank those people for taking on that challenge. There's a lot of paperwork involved, so that's a barrier, right, to doing a good job for you. So that if there are barriers like that in your process, you really want to lather on the thanks so that they know that it's worth it and that you see them going through that extra barrier on your behalf. And then talking to new people, because that shows a little bit more effort, right? You don't want to discourage them from hitting up the same old people. We want them to participate too. But definitely hitting new people and maybe giving them a target for that would be helpful. Hand up in the back.
I have a question.
Okay, great.
So one of the things that we do when we think, we have a local food pantry, is we will include a client story.
Mm-hmm.
But is that more reporting when you're saying you helped this client by blah, 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 blah?
It can be both. Like, don't get too wrapped up in which one it is. It's all good. Client stories are good. And you can use them in both kind of the thinking stage and the reporting stage. Absolutely. Yes?
Well, we're a faith-based organization, so this wouldn't apply to everybody in the room. But when we do our thank you calls after an event, we always ask if they have any prayer requests for their family or friends.
Good.
Which really gives us an opportunity to get to know what's on their heart. We get to know something about their children, their grandchildren, or whatever's on their mind. And then the other thing we do is once a year we do a thank you visit to anyone who's given us $500 or more in that year.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent.
A gift that usually has our name on it.
So that feels very personal, right? You're asking what you can do for them, so that's a more kind of reciprocal sort of relationship instead of just take. And then you're doing that personal thank you. Okay, there's some data out there that says when someone makes a donation, remember when they get that runner's high, right? Well, that doesn't last very long. Within a week or so, people forget what they did, right? Do you remember what you were doing last Tuesday? It's like, I got no idea. Half the time, they don't remember that they've donated to your nonprofit. Like at the end of the year in December, my husband and I are going through, okay, I gotta make all these donations. I'm like, did we give to them already? I can't remember. How much did we give? Blah, blah. No, you don't remember. So reminding people within that first week, if they get a thank you call from a staff person or a board member, it helps sort of imprint that more on their brain, and they are more likely to give to you again because it helps really solidify that memory of giving to you in the first place and feeling good about it. So that's excellent. Any other thank you examples anyone wants to share? Yes.
On a small scale, but every year we have a big Christmas party for our volunteers.
Christmas party for volunteers.
We have a big, summer beach party.
Nice.
And they seem to love that because we have the Executive Golf Women's League in Dayton, and every year they ask us if they can volunteer, and then they bring more people in, or they include their businesses, just because we have that party. I had no idea that would be so big.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on from the thanking to the reporting. Again, this is, question?
I have a question.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, so I noticed that with your thank you examples, that you did sort of a call to action with it. And I'm a little confused about, I mean, I've done a bunch of your
Yes.
webinars.
Great question.
In webinars, you always say, don't ask people for things.
Right.
When you thank them, just thank them.
Yes.
Take it away. So I'm confused.
Excellent question. Thank you for bringing that up. So, generally speaking, when you're doing a thank you after a monetary gift, don't hit them up again. Okay, that's what I usually tell you right on the webinars. What I wanted to do here, and this is going to sort of lead into where we're going now, is to encourage you to not wait to thank people until the very end, after the thing. So the thank yous that I gave you are sort of leading up to the event. So I did that on purpose to encourage you to be thanking people constantly, not just after the dinner or after the race, but to build in that gratitude, because this is a long process, right? So yes, you're right. When people send you money in the mail or on your website, don't hit them up again right away. You need to be doing some thanking and reporting. But in terms of our communications leading up to an event with our volunteers, you need to be thanking them throughout that process. Does that help? Yep. Okay. All right, let's boogie on here. We'll save some time for questions at the end, I promise. Okay, so we're going to report. What are the 3 most important messages? Again, we're focusing on our messaging now. We'll get into how we get those messages out in just a sec. But we're focusing on our messaging. So what are those 3 asks? What are the 3 ways we're going to focus on appreciation and thanks? And then what are the 3 messages that we're going to send out about the good that's made possible by these people? So we already talked about stories of people who are or will be helped, specific impact of the funds raised, what's going to be made possible as a result of their work. And then depending on the type of event, if you're doing peer-to-peer fundraising and you're using software that has a leaderboard showing who's raising how much money, if it's a competitive kind of thing like a race, and especially if you've got teams competing against each other, that sort of public leaderboard or other social proof that people are doing this, you're not the only one, can really be helpful. Okay, this is especially true if you have like corporate teams dueling against each other. Who's Brady Ware's biggest competition in this market, Bob?
Nobody comes close.
Okay. Who are the wannabes? Who are the wannabes? Okay, let's just call them the wannabe CPA firm. So we got Brady Ware against the wannabes, and they're trying to like raise the most money. Okay, in a lot of markets we see like if you have the local news anchors involved in this, sometimes you'll get like the TV station against the newspaper staff, and they're dueling it out. So if you've got that kind of situation, those leaderboards can be helpful. That's not going to work for everybody, but keep that in mind. Okay, so I want you to take a couple minutes here to fill out your worksheet again. How are you going to report back? This is answering the why am I doing this again question. You're really letting people know the impact of their work. Okay, I'll give you 90 seconds on this one because this one should be a little easier. Okay, so let's hear some of that reporting messaging. What does that sound like? I'm coming to you this side of the room. Who's got some examples of reporting messaging?
First of all, can I ask a question?
You certainly can, since these are going to be so quiet over here.
Are you asking us to ask ourselves why are we doing that, or are we asking the volunteer and fundraisers why are they doing it?
It's answering that question for them. Okay, so they're doing it because they're trying to help kids, or they're doing it because they care about animals, or whatever it is. Your reporting needs to focus on that. So stories of kids or animals or whatever it is that you're doing.
Okay.
All right, so who's got some examples for me? Go ahead.
We do a quick video after an event and
Great.
let people know what the results were and how they're doing.
What do you put in the video? Because the video is the sort of communications channel. Like, what are you actually saying in
Well,
it?
that one is very short. As the executive director, I'm just thanking them for their support, telling them how much it helps the organization and some of the ways that that we'll be able to move forward. in
Okay,
administrative
ways
work.
that we'll be able to move forward. That's what I'm looking for, okay? So often with our messaging, especially around events, we're just like, come to the event, come to the event, come to the event. And then we don't say anything about what we're doing with the money. And that is really the beginning of the story. For a lot of you, you feel like the event is like the end of the thing. Oh, we did it. It's really the beginning of the story because now you have this money to make this change in the world. And so that's what your donors care about. It's the beginning for them, not the end. Did you want to say something, Rick?
At this year's Meteor Shower Campout, we raised funds, and the following week was 9/11 workday, and we were able to use those funds with student volunteers and get the bathrooms painted at State Park and posted on Facebook.
Great, excellent. And so you told people that that's what you did with that money. You made those connections, right? You connected the dots for people. That's what you need to do with your reporting. Bob?
I don't know that I need a microphone, but
Give it to him.
all right, well, apparently I need a microphone, although I had plenty of people tell me I'm too loud. I'm thinking of a good example of this is think of your local United Way. Part of their annual fundraising appeal, they always do a campaign video, and the focus of that video is really to interview and provide communication from the member agencies that they support, and the actual community members that are receiving the services of those agencies, and then that becomes, somewhat of that visual tool that they can use not only through the campaign, but throughout the entire year to help build new donors and everything else, because it really highlights not only the mission, but more importantly, impact. And we haven't
Right.
talked about that yet, but really a big appeal to your donors is to be able to articulate what is the impact of my dollars.
Yep, specific impact, exactly.
And I've always felt that those tend to be very, very effective.
Good. Anyone else want to share? Okay. Oh, yes.
We're a small outreach organization in downtown Dayton, and after the tornadoes this year, I did a special appeal for funds, just mostly through some of our regular donors and our board members. And we did get a nice response from that fund to be able to help us, help the people that we work with. By following up very quickly afterwards to those donors and sharing some very specific stories of some of the people that we helped. Many of those donors turned right back around and sent us more money.
Yep, you followed the ask, thank, report cycle. Then you get to go back and ask. Excellent. Okay, so let's keep moving on here. So what you're doing now is communication strategy work. Okay, you're focusing on your target audiences, you're focusing on your key messages. These are strategic decisions that you're making right now. You need to take that worksheet back to work, have conversations with other people, maybe some of your major donors, your board, and really hone those things, because those messages are what's going to drive this whole bus. Okay, so this is very strategic thinking you're doing. All right, so now we've got our who, we've got our message. Now we need to really build that ask, think, report messaging into an editorial calendar. Okay, so we get to question 3 now. How do we deliver the message to those people? Notice we haven't talked about email or direct mail or social media yet, because that's not the first 2 questions, that's the 3rd question, so we're going there now. Okay? What I want you to do before you get into the weeds is to think big for a minute, okay? We're going to do what we call the big picture communications timeline. This is an exercise that can take all day in a big organization. If you run, like more than 2 or 3 programs, this can take all day as an annual sort of staff communications planning retreat. So we're going to start with that. And then we're going to dive back down into more of the campaign timeline for your volunteer fundraisers. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the off season. So we're going to start with the big picture communications timeline. So on your worksheet, we're on this page. Sometimes there's a lot more detail on this. I'm going to kind of do it quick. But I want you to see how this works in general so that you can use it in your own organization. So the first thing you're going to do is map out, I'm just going to fill in the worksheet and then we're going to come back and actually do the steps. The first thing you want to do is put the events out of your control. Okay, so you're just going to mark those in. So things that are out of your control would be things like Giving Tuesday. You're not changing the date of Giving Tuesday. Things like when school starts, when school gets out. Again, things that may impact your organization, you have no control over. When United Way is doing things, again, you don't have control over that if you're not United Way. Okay, so those are all the things that are happening that you don't have control over. Then you fill in the things that you do have control over. Okay, these are your events, your milestones, your programs. This is not just fundraising. Okay, this should be organization-wide. So you want to look at programmatically what's going on. You want to look at, from the fundraising and communications point of view, what's going on. Map that out. And then you want to think about, okay, what are our main calls to action? Remember we talked about the ask, that's a specific kind of call to action. So when are we generally asking people to do different things? Okay, how many of you are simultaneously asking someone to sign up for the golf tournament and do this and do that and do this other thing because you're not coordinating well? Things have just sort of organically happened and now you have this hot mess and you're asking people to do 4 things in March and then you don't talk to them for 4 months. Anybody in that situation? Okay, this is to help you figure that out in a very visual way so that you can fix it. So you got your calls to action, you're mapping that out. Again, you're putting these boxes wherever it makes sense for your organization. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to put on here are the story arcs. So this is the big picture message that you want to be conveying at certain times. What is my sort of takeaway about what you're communicating out to the world at any given time? All right, so let's go back through this. And I want you to fill out your worksheet as we step through it. So again, start at the bottom. What are those things that happen every year that are out of your control? Okay, these are out of your control. So, any Animal Humane Society people in the room? All right, when is kitten season?
April, May.
All right, that goes on there. We are not changing the biology of cats. So, kitten season is going on the thing. All right? If you do any kind of advocacy work, when the legislature's in session, when Congress is in session, whatever, that kind of stuff would be on there. So fill it out. Put on, look at the month, fill out the things that are most important to you. Doesn't have to be every single thing in the world. You don't need to put Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, unless you do like super big Mother's Day campaigns. In that case, I would probably put Mother's Day on there. But only put the things that really impact what your staff are doing during the course of the year. What are some things y'all are writing down? Things that are out of your control. Just yell them out.
Grant deadlines.
Grant deadlines, okay, what else?
Fiscal year.
Fiscal year, what else?
Regulations from the state.
State regs, what else? Weather. We do have hurricanes where I come from, so maybe you were thinking about me when you mentioned hurricanes. Taxes, yes. Certainly, that's a big one for the Brady Ware folks in the room.
One of the things we have to watch is in our area when the sports tournaments are.
Yes. Right? If you try to do anything when Duke and Carolina are playing in North Carolina, you are an idiot. All right? No one is doing your thing. Okay, so you got to pay attention to these things. My birthday often falls on Final Four weekend. It's very unfortunate. Okay, so you're putting your stuff on there, right? So school year, Giving Tuesday, whatever it is. Okay, now it's time to put in your events, things you control. Now you may think, oh God, there's no way I could ever move this thing, but you could. If it's one of your events, you probably could. So go ahead and put that stuff on there now. And again, be thinking about the big programmatic things as well as your fundraising stuff. Okay, so I've put big event. That's what we're going to call the volunteer fundraiser event that we're going to work on here. What are some of those things you're writing down? Things that are in your control but are happening at a specific time of year.
Strategic planning and business planning.
Okay, when you do your strategic plan and business plan, What about programmatically? The things you do as an organization.
Like appeal letters?
Appeal letters would be a fundraising thing, yeah. Membership campaigns.
We have like a 5K gala.
Okay. Sometimes if you have programs that, like my husband used to work in the land trust community, and so they would have different deadlines about when they had to get some of the legal stuff and accounting stuff done throughout the course of the year. So you want to put all that kind of stuff on there. All right, moving up to the calls to action. So we're going to bump up above the little timeline now. What steps are you asking people to take throughout the year? Okay, and try to really, think, don't put, well, we want people to donate 365 days of the year. It's like, well, you're not asking people to do that. So let's really focus on when, what the messages are. So in this case, we're asking people to renew their membership at the beginning of the year, and to RSVP for an event, RSVP for lobby day, then RSVP for the big event, and then do the donate. Okay, those are going to be the big calls to action, the most important things you want people to do to support your organization. This is probably where you're going to start to see a lot of overlap. And this is, the light bulbs are going to go off in somebody's head. There will be people in your organization that don't realize that you're trying to do 5 things at once. And going through this exercise with them will clarify that. It'll be like, oh, wow, we are really doing too much in the spring. Maybe we should stretch this out a little bit. Okay, so you can have those conversations with people. Again, this is big picture. Okay, not just your volunteer fundraisers, but your whole messaging. You're getting communications planning in this course or in this workshop today as well. Okay, now the next one, and this is often the hardest, and we do entire trainings on this as well, but what's the story that you're trying to tell at different times of the year? And how can people participate in that with you? So my example here is while we're trying to get people to renew their membership, our messaging in that sort of winter, spring is going to be all about members making change in the world. That's going to be our big story arc. Everything that we do is going to tie back into that umbrella message because we're trying to get people to renew. And so we want them to understand that this is a really cool thing to be a part of, and you're going to make change with all these other people. And then later on in the summer, maybe we shift towards more like professional development kind of messaging, the power of learning, that sort of thing. So I want you to think, and again, this is hard. I don't expect you to have all the answers today right here, but it is something you need to go home and think about, is what is our real big message that we're sending out at different times of the year? What's that story we're telling? Anybody have any thoughts about that now that you're willing to share real quick? What are some of the different pieces of the story? Yes?
I guess when I think about a story, I think we try to tell like a success story, somebody who had an experience at our place, and we want to share it with people so they have an idea. They might be more intrigued to come out and experience themselves.
Okay, so that's a great individual story. What I would encourage you to do is tell a number of those individual stories that collectively tell me something about your organization or the big change that you're making in the world again. You want to connect. Individual storytelling is fabulous, but if it's happening in a vacuum, it doesn't have the same power as if it's hooked to a larger story that you're trying to tell. So when you're telling these individual stories, like what are those individuals, like what's the yay moment in the story? What are they doing? What are they achieving? What are they overcoming?
Spiritual growth.
Okay, so collectively, if you tell the story of 7 individuals and their spiritual growth, what does that mean in the larger sense?
It's happening at the shrine.
Say it again.
Good things are happening.
Good things are happening, okay? So yeah, work on that. So maybe over the course of the spring or whatever, that's your core message, is that good things are happening. And here's these little example stories that prove that case. Okay, that's what you're trying to do with these story arcs.
I have a question.
Yes.
Obviously, there's kind of a consistency in the timeline that you're presenting, and I've seen in other organizations, but for our organization, we're a military veteran organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so our timeline's kind of shifted to hit those high points of the year. So like our events are kind of focused more in May and November and some during the summer. Is that viable to kind of switch our calendar year, so to speak, on how we shift through?
Yeah, absolutely. Do whatever you need to do. Yeah, for sure. Now, the important part is that you don't just go silent in between.
Right.
Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about next. So we've done this big picture communications timeline. Okay, again, this really helps you sort of get the context for what we're going to focus on now, which is the more individual campaign timeline. And you will have a number of campaigns that all need to fit on the timeline. All right, so we're diving a little deeper now into the specific calendar for your volunteer fundraisers. So in my example here, we've got our big event in October, and we're going to work on a 12-week timeline for our volunteer fundraisers. 12 weeks may be too short for your thing. It may be too long for your thing. Okay, so if you're doing a Giving Tuesday campaign, okay, I actually got a Giving Tuesday email this morning. So what are we, like 4 weeks out from Giving Tuesday? You don't need to be talking about Giving Tuesday in August, right? So 12 weeks is going to be too long for that. For a big race event, those campaigns are almost 12 months long. Like the minute the race is over, they're kind of starting again. All right, so you need to adjust depending on what your thing actually is. I've set it up as 12 weeks just as an example. All right, there's no miracle about 12 weeks. That's just what we're using as the example. So you have an editorial calendar that's kind of broken out over 2 pieces of paper in your handout. So what I've done here is you've got the 12 weeks down the side. You've got your communications channels across the top. Now, again, you should have something like this for all of your communications for your whole organization. This is called an editorial calendar, but we're going to focus on just the campaign editorial calendar. So I put your event week at week 8. Okay, again, you can adjust to what you know works for your organization, but by default, if you don't feel like you have a clue, I would put 2/3 of the communications before the thing and 1/3 after. Okay, so that's why we've got the event at week 8. So before we even jump in here, we may have some pre-launch things we're going to do. Then we're going to go to soft launch the first 2 weeks, full launch in week 3 and 4. What's the difference between soft and full? Those of you that have done campaign work. What's a soft launch?
Not all the details, just a teaser.
A teaser, or could be a save the date. Lots of times what you're doing here is you're going back to your core people first. You're directly getting them involved so that when you go to full launch, you can already say, you know, we've got 20 people signed up, or 20 teams are building now. It's that sort of that social proof concept. It's kind of like, how many of you have done a capital campaign with the silent phase? It's kind of that sort of idea. Like you get your people in the inner circle on board, and then you go more public. Okay, then you have active campaign mode, which is really kind of the mid-launch. The middle is always the trouble place. Like we're good at launching things, and we're good at doing the thing, but the middle often gets really muddy and vague. So when you're really building this out, I really encourage you to think hard about what you're saying there in the middle to keep the momentum going. And then you've got that final push for the event, and then you have the event, and then you need to go right into your thanking messaging and your reporting messaging. And again, those can blur a little bit. For the purposes of today, where we're sort of learning this stuff, I'd like you to go ahead and keep it separate, just so you can really think through how it applies to your organization. But in reality, a lot of that can be merged. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is just fill in that first column where it says key messages. You have your messages, right? We just went through all your messaging, your ask, thank, report messaging. So what I want you to do now is to sort of make some notes in that first column about what you're saying when in your campaign plan. You're filling in your editorial calendar. We're just doing that first column with the key messages. When are you making those asks? When are you doing that thank you messaging? When are you doing that reporting messaging? When are you saying what? By doing this, we are getting away from all those bad things we talked about at the very beginning, like the rushing and the guilt and the Groundhog Day. You're planning so that it makes sense and the timing works out, both for staff and for the people you're communicating with. Okay, so we're mapping out our message strategy on the calendar. All right, now, these are big, big, big questions. How often do you need to be communicating with folks? That's going to vary depending on what you're asking them to do, how hard that ask is, how long the campaign strategy is. But you really want to think about your frequency, okay? And then in which communications channels should I be communicating with them? So in your chart, you have email, direct mail, what else did I put on there? Social, did I just put those things? Yeah. Website. Okay, you may have other communications channels that are important to you, but you want to be thinking, okay, in week 3, what am I putting on social? Or week 4, does the website homepage need to change? This is where you're mapping all of that out. How many emails are going out? When are they going out? How many pieces of direct mail are going out? And when are they going out? Okay, the goal isn't to fill in every single box. That's not what you're trying to do. You're just trying to map out what you're saying and when throughout this campaign. Okay, this is an editorial calendar. Yes?
And of course, now that we have so many avenues for communicating, how do we walk that fine line of not overkill?
Right. Generally speaking, nonprofits are more worried about that than they should be. Now, there are certainly organizations that are over-communicating, but most of you are under-communicating.
Is there such a thing as over-communicating?
In theory, but in practice, I rarely see it. When you think about, what's your average open rate for your email? 20% maybe, right? That would be the industry average. It's actually a little lower than that now. Okay, that means there's 80% of your list that is not even seeing it, really. There's some fudging in the way that math is calculated, but generally speaking, that's what we're going with. What is your organic reach on Facebook right now? Anybody know for their page? Maybe 10%. If you're not boosting those posts, again, so 90% not seeing it. So if we go back to the old advertising maxim that someone has to see something 7 times before they act, that's seeing it 7 times. Okay, you have people that are not, the majority of people aren't seeing the email, aren't seeing the post. You gotta be churning that stuff out to get anywhere close to them actually seeing it.
And then pay attention.
Right. Okay, if you have someone calling you to complain that they're seeing too much from you, that's a good thing. Have a conversation with that person. But hardly anybody gets that call. Now we can talk about the direct mail house solicitations some other time. That's a different story. Okay, but I also want you to be thinking about content that you're giving to your volunteer fundraisers to encourage them to follow through on your calls to action. But then you're also thinking about content you're giving them to give to their friends and family. Okay, you need to make their job easy. So when do the Bobs of the world, your volunteer donors, when do they need to say what to people to get them to contribute to you or to sign up or whatever it is? And can you just sort of draft that content for them and then let them put it in their own words if they want, but if they don't, they can just send it out. Okay, so you need to be thinking about how you're delivering that content as well. And you're mapping all of this out on your editorial calendar for the campaign. And again, you want to do this same kind of thing for all the different campaigns, and then hopefully they merge into one editorial calendar. Okay, when you're doing this, here are some considerations. Deliver content based on goals and milestones for your volunteer fundraisers. So if you're expecting them to meet certain goals at certain times, you need to back that out so that you're giving them the support they need to actually achieve those goals. Okay, so it's not this like hurry up and like do the impossible. We don't really want to position people that way. You want to invite them into an exclusive community. So are you allowing your volunteer fundraisers to know who each other are, to have conversations with each other, to feel like they're included in the decision making in the process? You want to share more behind the scenes content with your volunteer fundraisers. Again, this makes them feel like an insider. If I know what you are doing around this event and you're telling me about that, now I feel like we're actually part of a team. So think about some of that content that you can put out there. Make sure everything is accurate, again, where Google is sending them in particular, on your website, and be available. Now, the expectation is immediately. We know that's sort of unrealistic, but again, think about how you can let people know that you'll get back to them, and really pay attention to these people. When your volunteer fundraisers are emailing you or calling, they should move to the top of your to-do list. You need to get back to these people quickly. And monitor all of the channels that you know your people are using. It's good to actually ask them when they sign up to be a fundraiser for you. Do they like to text? Do they do Facebook Messenger? How do they want to communicate with you? And let them really, you're trying to make it easy for them. Let them tell you how to communicate with them. Okay, so you're building out your campaign plan. Any questions about filling that chart in? This is definitely homework. It's going to take a while to do, but it's really important. This is what helps you solve all those ugly, nasty problems we talked about at the beginning. Okay, so you're doing your 12-week campaign or whatever it is. Now you need to talk about what you're doing in the off season, okay, when you're not actually talking to people about the event. So if you've got your 12-week aggressive campaign around your event, what are you doing the rest of the year? This is where a lot of people do nothing, or they send the volunteer fundraisers kind of back into the generic pool, like they're just getting the same newsletter that everybody else gets. And that's not bad. I'm not saying you shouldn't send them that. But what I am saying is they deserve something extra, additional from you during this time. So you need to go ahead and map that out too. Okay, your goal here is to stay friends in the off season, whatever that off season looks like for you. So think about that, okay? So continuing to thank them and having them thank their supporters in the following month, like the time right after you're wrapping everything up, is really important. Over the next 2 to 6 months, focus on the good work that was made possible. This is the reporting. Thanks and reporting, but lots and lots of reporting about the good things that are happening. If people have a profile of some sort with you where they log in to a campaign or a website to manage this fundraising, try to keep those active from year to year. Again, it kind of depends on what software you're using, but making people start from scratch every time and enter all their email contacts again and all of that is a hassle. So to the extent that you can keep things consistent, encourage people to update that profile, add off-season milestones and badges, again, if you're using that kind of peer-to-peer software, and then make it really simple to register for next year. Do I got any Girl Scout people in the room? Scout leader or Scout staff? Okay. Girl Scouts drives me insane about this. I love Girl Scouts. I'm a Girl Scout leader. But every year it's new software. And I understand they're trying to make our experience better, but every year I got to enter the emails again. It's like I would love to just be able to go in there and have it all there. Remind them about their previous success. When you start, you're coming back around to event time. You want to encourage them to do it again. Again, people can't remember what they did last week, let alone 9 or 10 months ago. So remind them, remember you raised this much money, or you did this awesome thing. If you wrote a profile about them, send them the profile, because again, they probably forgot that they told you this whole story. Let them know, it's like, oh yeah, we did this really cool thing and I want to do that again. Okay, ask for their advice. What's the old maxim about advice and fundraising? How does it go, you development directors?
You ask for their advice and they give you money.
If you ask for money, what do you get? Advice. Okay, so we want to ask for people's advice. We want to give them input. Now, if you do this, you have to actually listen. You know, don't be one of those people that says, oh, you get to name our thing, and then it's wide open, and people come up with some stupid name, and that gets all the votes, and now you're stuck with a stupid name. Like, make sure that you like all 3 names, and then let them vote. But let people give some input. Okay, so note those off-season ideas. You should be able to do that at the very end of the worksheet, I believe. Yes, ideas for off-season communications. Okay, sketch some of those in there. Ways that you can stay in touch and be BFFs all year long. All right, so it's time for questions. I think I've got a little time before Bob comes up. Let's just take 5 minutes if there are questions. And then we're going to hear about this from the donor point of view. But who has questions about anything I've said or haven't said that you thought I should have said? Yes.
Someone mentioned they get business cards or something when they go out and visit and stuff like that. What is your feeling that if they do make a donation to give them some kind of a trinket or bling or something of that nature? Is that a good thing, bad thing?
Okay, so this is like a can of worms, but we'll talk about it real quick. So public media, public radio, public TV has long, anybody work in public media? Okay, they have long been in the business of this, right? You hear the pledge drive, like, you're like, oh, I'm not calling yet because I don't care about that trip. I'm gonna wait for the mug or whatever. It gets into this real transactional kind of thing, which you generally wanna avoid, okay? A lot of the public radio nonprofits are experimenting with getting away from that. Because what you really want people to do is because they want to give because they love the cause, not because they're going to get entered into a cruise drawing or something. So you want to be careful about not doing that too much. Now, if your asks are about the cause and people are giving for the cause, then I think whether you want to include a t-shirt or whatever as a thank you is up to you. And sort of the value. I mean, does everybody need another pen? I don't know, probably not. Do we need another mug? Probably not. It just depends on your cause, right? So like I mentioned that my husband works for the Yadkin Riverkeeper. They got a bunch of t-shirts printed up, but instead of putting their logo all over it, it's got like cute little plays on words. They're pretty goofy. I can't remember what they are now, they're so goofy. But it's a cute little t-shirt, it's good colors, it's good graphics, it's got a cute little saying on it, and the logo is really small. So it's the kind of thing that anybody would wear, but their logo is getting out there.
Okay, I had one other question too that I wrote down. We're a small performing arts organization, and I guess one of the things that we've struggled with is that, such as the Dayton tornadoes and you know, the Pink Ribbon Girls and stuff, which I think is great, but we're having to fight those organizations for the money because they want to give more to a medical or a special needs cause versus performing arts. And I'm wondering how we kind of fight that. I mean,
right.
I want them to give their money to them and stuff, but we also want the same funds that everybody else does.
Right. So the thing is, like, people's hearts are not, you know, just like this limited pie. Like their checkbooks might be, but their hearts are not. So you want to stay connected. Keep the messaging, keep the ask, thank reporting, keep it going, and people will return to you. In the immediate aftermath, whether it's a natural or man-made disaster of any kind, yes, we tell you people that are not helping the people in need to back it off. I say a month is usually like the default. Now every situation is different. You have to kind of understand what's happening on the ground, but I would pull This is where when you schedule things in advance and you auto set it and forget it, that can be really ugly. If you've got something going out, like right after something bad happens, you need to roll it back, but then you got to get back on it. And people still love the arts. I don't have to choose between helping a victim of a natural disaster and whether I love theater. I can do both. So just stay with it. They will come back around.
Curious to hear your thoughts on the importance or non-importance of direct mail and printed pieces these days with the increased use of electronic.
Right. So unfortunately, we are in a time in the world where it's a multi-channel world, and to be successful, you have to do multi-channel. Now, there are certainly organizations that are just online and raise plenty of money, but that's not the majority of nonprofits. The majority of nonprofits are still relying on a fairly older donor base that responds to direct mail. There have been some situations where millennials have responded well to direct mail because they don't get that much mail. And so it's super exciting. Like, I cannot tell you how thrilled my 13-year-old is. She's not a millennial, she's a Z or whatever they call them now. She gets something in the mail with her name on it. And I'm like, it's just junk mail, but it's to me, So it just sort of depends, but yeah, direct mail still raises a lot of money in the US, especially with sort of the 60 and older set. Gen X, like me, people in their 40s and 50s, were sort of equally responsive. When you start to get younger than that, it does tend to trend more online or in-person event type fundraising, but you kind of got to do it all, really. Yes?
So I don't know what to do about, I've seen all the research that talks about how if you can tell them specifically what they're getting for their money, right? Give us $50 and we can buy 100 pencils. Well, we provide expensive veterinary care that nobody else can provide to keep the family together. Somebody that gives $50, how do we tell them, okay, that's going to help with this $10,000 surgery that we'll be providing to somebody? I mean, it doesn't sound exciting to them. So
oh my God, you were talking about animals. Like, you have no excuse for anything, okay? And I'm only telling you that because it sounds like you've taken some of my training, so you know how I talk to people. Animal people, you do not get to complain about anything. In a room like this, you can complain privately, but there are all kinds of people here who are like, what is her problem? She's got dogs. Okay?
It doesn't work that way,
I know.
It is not that easy at all.
I know, but believe me, that's what half this room is thinking right now, trust me. So, but you have compelling stories. You have amazing befores and afters. So I would focus less on the sort of menu approach that does work for a lot of people and focus more on your accomplishments. If you can do before and after all day long, every day, before and after, that is enough. Because people see the difference that's being made, okay? And I wouldn't worry so much about, well, $50 doesn't help. Like, you can message that. Like, we collect animal lovers need to take care of this dog. Am I an animal lover? You bet I am. Do what you can to support this dog. Well, I can give you the $50, and you're going to treat me the same way that you treat a $5,000 donor in the communications. I'm going to feel like I'm part of the good people in the world. Okay. I am going to, what am I going to do? I think I got one more slide. Okay, so I want to leave you with a quote from Dr. Maya. I've learned that people will forget what you did, what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel, right? This is all about making sure that our donors, our volunteer fundraisers, feel what? What do we want to make them feel? In love with us. We're their favorite cause. They're loyal to us. Right? And the way that we do that We make them feel included, appreciated, and in the know. Those of you looking for the magic bullet of fundraising, this is it. All right, there's no magic. It's working this. This is what raises money. All right? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Bob now, who is going to tell you all about this from a donor perspective. So here's how you can stay in touch with me. If you email me, which I invite you to do, put something like Dayton in the subject line. I get a lot of email that I delete without reading. So you need to make sure that I see you in my inbox as someone I actually want to converse with. So give me some help in the subject line. And then I'll get back to you when I can. And we have tons of training online, a lot of free stuff on our website. So if there's anything I didn't cover today, odds are we've blogged about it at some point. So just go search and check that out. Thank you very much. I'm here till noon. I got to get home and get through the Halloween candy before my kids get home. So I'm going to be bugging out then, but I'm happy to have conversations with any and all of you, as many people as I can talk to between now and noon. So just grab me.